Hello and welcome back to the AI technical training. This is session 3. So hopefully from last time you've had the opportunity to compare various different AI models to understand their strengths and weaknesses in terms of their speed, their capabilities, their costs, etc. And you've also had the chance to test out various different AI models to actually get practical hands-on experience with your own use case, or you're starting to develop your use case now, bridging that gap, as Alex talks about, between expectations and reality through practical hands-on experience. And you're starting to get a feel for which LLMs are likely to provide the most benefit for your particular case. Now, we've spent the last session delving into LLMs. In this session, we're going to take a look at some of the other modalities that we spoke about in the first session. So remember, we spoke about you could have text in and text out, which is what LLMs do. You've also got images, you've got sounds, you've got videos, and all different ways of getting input into AI models and getting output from the other end. So let's take a look at some other modalities. And we're also going to start getting slightly more technical. And I'm going to split the session, or interweave the session between looking at some of the more practical things that you can test out without having to have a lot of technical knowledge, and then also looking at some of the technical side behind that. You don't necessarily need to fully understand the technical side, but it's good to get a bit of familiarity so that when you are actually starting to develop your AI apps and you're working with developers and engineers, you've got a bit of a shared vocabulary so that you can understand what they're saying and you can also express your intentions to them in a way that will make sense. Okay, let me move myself out of the way and reveal this dog. Now, why is this dog here? Well, one of the things that I wanted to show you is an example of what's called an AI upscaler. And the reason why I'm showing you that will become clear in just a moment. So here we've got a very, very low resolution, a pixelated image. It could be something that's from an old computer, could have been taken on an old camera or whatever else. But for whatever reason, we haven't got a lot of detail in this image. Now, there exists a set of tools which are called AI upscalers, which will take this image and will kind of fill in the missing details. Now, this isn't CSI or anything like that. Unfortunately, when they say enhance, 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 and it just gets progressively clearer and you can kind of zoom into a tiny dot in the corner and find out who the murderer is, that technology obviously doesn't exist. You can't create data where data doesn't exist. So what these AI models do is they use that kind of generation stuff that we talked about. So it fills in the missing information with stuff that it imagines. So that will provide the missing information. It will upscale the image, but it won't look exactly the same as this. But, for old quality images, you can get a pretty good representation of the subject. So one of the examples of the state of the art for these tools is called Magnific. And I've got that open in a tab here. Let me just shift myself out of the way. So we've got Magnific here, which is a tool for upscaling images using AI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press upload and I'm going to choose that low quality image. You can see it's only 192 by 108 pixels, so there's hardly any information there whatsoever. I'm going to say I want to scale it up by 16 times. So that's going to be 3072 by 1728, which is much more practical for an image that you might print or put on the web or whatever else. I'm going to give it a bit more information, so I'm going to tell it that it's a golden retriever. And I'm going to leave all of the other settings the same for the purposes of this demo. Then I'm going to hit upscale. Okay, so it's going to do its thing, and I'm just going to put the video on pause because it takes like a minute or two to actually do that. So when I come back, we'll have the final result. Okay, so that's now finished. And it's showing me the original image here. So that's the image that I uploaded, that low quality image here. And then if I scrub across, we can see the job that the AI upscaler has done. So you can see that there's now a lot more detail in this image. But if you look, we've originally got some symmetry here. So the fur kind of goes in almost like a heart shape in the middle, whereas now it's a lot less defined. So you can see that in the process of doing the upscaling, the AI has kind of filled in and imagined the details. So you do lose some of the actual original definition, but I think that's a pretty good looking image, and that's something that's now much more suitable to be used for whatever purpose I want to use it for. And the reason that I've shown you this is a totally proprietary tool. So when it comes to using AI models, so you've seen the LLMs, for example, they allow you to actually call into them and get some information out. So your AI app will be able to call upon those AI models and say, here's the input, give me the output. Now, Magnific, for example, doesn't actually offer that. So you basically pay a subscription, you buy tokens, and you can see at the bottom here, that cost me 25 tokens to upscale that image. And here's my balance of tokens left at the top here, which refreshes on a monthly basis. And they decided to go to that model because they feel that that's the best way to monetize their business. So they're not in the business of providing access to the AI models that they've created to do this upscaling. So unfortunately, if you wanted to work with an AI upscaler and you thought, I'm going to use Magnific, you can't, unless you contact them and you come to some kind of commercial arrangement. You say, I want to white label your service or however else you want to do it. They don't give you access to the AI models. They've obviously put a lot of work in. They've got proprietary pipelines to enable them to do this upscaling in really high quality. And that's the difference between models that are proprietary and services that you can use. And the way that you use those services is through something called an API. And this is a slightly technical part of the of this session. So an API stands for an application programming interface, API. And essentially you can kind of think of it as enabling two computers or two services to talk together. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's just say I wanted to get the weather. So if I go on to this site here, this is typically how I, as a human, would access weather information, right? This means this is very easy for me to understand, for me to get information from. So I can see, today it was a high of 13, and this is in Celsius, by the way. It's still pretty cold, but it's not quite as cold as it may seem. So it was a maximum of 13. It was a minimum of 9. Here's my sunrise and my sunset, UV ratings, cloud cover, all of that kind of stuff. Instantly, as a human being, I can process this information and get what I need out of it. Now, imagine that I'm creating a SaaS that provides weather information, and I don't actually want to go out and carry out thousands of weather measurements around the world per day. So I want to rely on an existing service to provide that information for me. Well, it's going to be very, very difficult for me to actually get this information automatically for my service. Actually, saying that, we can try a little bit of an experiment. Now that there's AI models and there's AI image models, that's actually become significantly easier. So if I were to just take a screenshot of this, take that screenshot, and I'm going to go into Claude here. I'm going to paste it in. Say, give me a summary of the day's weather. So now we've got AIs that can go off and read that information. There we go, straight away. It's pulled that information out. It's given me all the information. It's given me a summary of that, which is amazingly fast. But this doesn't scale. So this obviously costs me to actually talk to the AI model. It's error prone potentially. So we need a better way of enabling my weather SaaS or whatever I'm actually going to be creating to talk to this weather service and actually get that information out of it in a way that my application can understand. And that's where these APIs come in. So here, for example, if I move myself out of the way again, is an example of an API response. So this is a service that provides weather information in a way that computers can understand. Now, because I've been dealing with this for so long, this actually makes a lot of sense to me. But for most people, like probably 99% of people, this is going to be a lot easier to sort of understand and comprehend than this. But a computer can understand this a lot easier. So if we just go past this bit here. So I've got all of the times it's providing weather information for, and then it's given me basically for every, I think it's hour or 2 minutes, I think it is, or whatever the period is, it's given me the temperature, it's given me the relative humidity, and it's given me the wind speed. And that's information that my SaaS application or whatever it is I'm creating can consume, and it could then potentially turn it into a nice display that's suitable for humans. So you have this concept of APIs, and that's a way of presenting information in a way that a computer can understand, process, and operate with, without having to do the mucky stuff of looking at this and trying to extract the information from it, which, until we had AI models, was a very, very difficult task indeed. You had to scrape it, you had to parse it. But actually, if you can use an API, then there's no need to do that whatsoever. So you can kind of think of this as the glue between different computer systems. We've got the weather service over here, we've got my weather SaaS over here, and the APIs are what transfer that information between the two services. So why am I telling you this? Well, you can use these APIs to actually call upon AI models to do tasks for you, and then to transfer that information into your SaaS AI app that you're building. How do I find these AI models? So we've already given you kind of an overview of how to find LLMs, how to compare them, how to kind of go into their playgrounds and use them. How about for the other modalities? So there are a few different places that you can look for these things. So a good example is Hugging Face, for example, but that tends to be more technically oriented. So I always find that a good place to start is this service here, which is called Replicate. And Replicate is a way of exploring. It's basically like a catalog of open weights models that you can run. You can test them out using the web interface. And then when you're ready to actually start using them, you can then use the APIs to integrate them into your AI application. So what do we have here? So I'm going to go straight onto Explore. And we get this catalog of some of the more popular models. So they give you information about them. So here, for example, you've got a model which is doing material transfer. So you can see you've got this picture of a bird on the left-hand side. And now we've got the glass bead as the material. It's applied the glass bead to the bird. And on the right-hand side, you can now see a glass bird. So that's a very, very specialized model, right? So LLMs that we've dealt with before are very generic. They can carry out a large number of tasks, whereas a lot of these models that you find on Replicate do one very, very specific thing very well. And you can also see the popularity here. So you can see this has been run 1,200 times. This is 3,600 times. And literally every time you come on this, you'll see different models on here. It's being updated constantly. So you could easily lose, you can lose so much time on here looking through all of the different models and getting an idea of what you can actually accomplish. So we've got Whisper here, for example, which is a way of transcribing. So like, for instance, this video, it will pull out everything I'm saying and turn it into text, which is great for people who find it easier to read, to index the video, for people who are deaf, etc. So there's all kinds of different models on here, and they're broken down into categories. So we've got all kinds of things. So you can ask models about images. So that's kind of similar to what I did with the weather thing I pasted in before, transcribing speech, as I mentioned, generating speech, making music. One of the hot things at the moment are the Suno and Udio AI services, which allow you to basically type in a style of music. You can provide lyrics, or it can create the lyrics for you, and it will generate you a song off the back of that. So these are the open weights equivalent of those models, and all kinds of other stuff. What you tend to find is that compared to like these specialized services like Magnific, where they put a lot of engineering effort into creating these models, they might not be as good, but at least they're open. You can integrate them with your AI app. And you can swap them out as they become more capable over time. As I say, this catalog is constantly being updated. So as new models come along, you can swap them out for the latest thing and get an improvement in quality very, very quickly. Okay, so where shall we start? Well, considering we used Magnific as an example just a moment ago, let's go into the Upscale Images catalog, and we can see a load of examples here. It just goes on and on. So you can see this has had 43 million runs. So this is sorted by popularity, or the number of times it's been used. And basically you can now just start playing around with these and seeing which one fits your use case. So some of these are particularly good at faces, for example. So, if you wanted to offer a service that restores old photographs, you would use a particular model. If it's something that's more generic, then you would use a more generic model. So it's important just to have a play around and experiment to see which ones fit your use case. So let's go for this one here. Just pick this at random. And we can see here we've kind of got this input, this very, very fuzzy image of this frog, and this kind of upscaled version. It doesn't really look, if you can kind of compare the quality of that, it looks quite, you've got these kind of soft surfaces, and you've got these big areas of no detail. So I can already see that it's not as good as Magnific, but let's kind of see how it works with our dog. So they make it very, very easy to interact with these models without having to use the API. So you can play around with it using this form-based input here. This one doesn't have that many options. So you have the image that you want to upload here, and then you have the task here. And I would explain how you kind of actually figure out what that is in just a moment, but let's go with the default settings. So I'm going to press this little upload icon here, which will clear the frog. And I'm going to choose that dog image again, and I'm just going to hit run. So we should now get some logs that tell me what's going on with it here. And one thing that is worth noting is that you have this concept of warm and cold models. So you can see that at the top, whenever you go into a model here on Replicate, you get this little icon here that says whether it's warm or cold. And a warm model is already kind of ready to run, loaded onto a GPU, loaded into memory on a cloud server somewhere, so that it's pretty, pretty quick to run. Although this actually seems to have taken a little while. And I can explain in a moment just how to actually turn this into a dedicated service. So let me just try refreshing again, just in case we're stuck in a queue for whatever reason. Okay, I tell you what, I am going to, just like I did with Magnific, I'm just going to put the video on pause for just a moment until it actually runs they call it a prediction, but basically that's the equivalent of running the model. And once that's done, I can show you the output. So catch you in a moment. Okay, so about a minute later, that completed, and it actually only took 1.5 seconds to actually run the model to produce the output. The rest of the time was the actual model loading up. So that's one important thing to note, is that because this is a shared service, anything that you submit to it is going to end up being in a queue. You might have to wait a little while to wait basically for your output to happen. So let's take a look and see what is generated. So this is the input here, and the output is okay, but not that great. So I personally wouldn't use this model. There are some other options here, and for any model that you go onto, you will have like this README just here, which will tell you more about how the model works and how to actually choose some of the settings. So it's a case of playing around with it, and that can actually be some of the value that you provide is by actually tweaking the options in these models to get the best out of them. So rather than just offering a service that offers the default, if you put the time and the effort in to find the best combination of parameters and options for that model, then you basically value added, and that can be a good thing for you to offer. Let's try a different one. Let's try this Clarity Upscaler. So here's a before and after. So you can see that this seems to be much more performant. This is adding a lot more detail into this image of the bird. Let's go again with our dog image. And again, I'm going to leave, there's a lot more settings on this one. I'm going to leave them all at default for now, and then we can go and play with it in just a moment. So hit run. This again is a warm model. Okay, and as you can see, we've got some output here. That's kind of run straight away. And yeah, I'm not too pleased with that. Okay, and this is where actually playing with the settings can make a lot of difference. So here's the prompt, and we've got a default prompt here saying, hey, it's a masterpiece, it's best quality, it's high resolution, and then some sort of more technical details here. But let's actually add in what it is that we're trying to create. So this is a golden retriever, and add that at the start of the prompt. We've got a negative prompt here, which is what we don't want to see. We don't want to see bad quality, low quality. I'm going to up the scale factor, let's say to 8. And I'm going to play with some of these parameters. Let's try 192, 176. And again, this is kind of a mix of experience and trial and error. But the good thing is that running these is pretty cheap. So you've got the option of playing around with this until you can find a good combination of settings. Let's run that again. This will probably take a little longer because we're scaling it up to 8 times rather than just twice. So while that's running, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the page. And you can see here that this tells you the information about what kind of GPU it's running on and how much this model output costs. So you can see here this is running on an A100, which is one of those beefy GPUs that I spoke about in the first session. This tells you how much it costs to actually use that GPU on a per second basis, how long it takes to complete. So then it gives you an approximate cost. So every time I upscale an image, this is going to cost me about 6 cents. So you can take that into consideration when you carry out your pricing. We spoke a little bit about pricing models previously, subscription-based, usage-based, combination of the both, etc. This kind of gives you a ballpark so that you can start building that into that calculation. Okay, let's see if this is run. Yes, it has. Okay, and instantly that is a lot better than the first prediction that we had. So if I switch back to Magnific, this is obviously still a lot better quality. Let's go back here. I much prefer the output from Magnific, but this is getting a lot closer. So you can see that with a little bit of patience, trying out the various different models, and then playing with the settings, you'll be able to get a lot closer to some of the proprietary commercial models, and then that's potentially something that you could offer as a service. And again, there is a README here. Okay, there's hardly anything in this, but if we go on to the paper, for example, there's some more information about how this model works, and hopefully there should be some documentation about some of the settings in here and how to use them. So play around with the settings, come up with a set that's best for the type of image that you're trying to upscale or whatever it is that you're trying to do, and then remember those settings so that you can then basically bake that into your AI app. So I mentioned before about warm and cold models. So the other thing that you can do is you can actually have these what's called dedicated. So you can actually take this and basically create your own instance of it, which is basically where you have a GPU that is reserved only for your use and your use of this model so that you don't have to wait. You're not putting this to this queue. You haven't got to wait for the model to boot up if it's cold. That's your own service that's basically there just for you to use. That gets pretty expensive. So if you're just prototyping or you're trying to find product market fit or you have a small number of customers, you could start with the public option. And then as you scale up and become more popular, you can then use this service to actually rent a GPU or multiple GPUs that are solely for your use. And then you can skip the waiting time. So it's still going to take, this amount of time. It's still going to take sort of 13 seconds or however long it is to actually run the upscaling, but you're skipping that cold boot time and you're skipping the queue and going straight to the front. So that's something to consider as your service gets more popular. Let's take a look at something else within this. So we've looked at image upscaling. I'm going to try one other thing. Let's go on to speech generation, for example. Okay, so we've got some cool things here. We've got some voice cloning, which can actually take your own voice and then create a voice model based on that sounds like you and can say anything in your own voice. There's a few different things here. And then we've got a text prompted model here. Let's give this a go. I'm hoping that this is capturing the sound from the computer as well. If not, then it doesn't matter too much. But hopefully it is. So let's see if I play this. Does it work?
Hello, my name is Suno, and I like pizza.
But I also have other interests, such as playing tic-tac-toe.
Okay, so let's try this ourselves. Let's go into the playground. And I'm just going to say, hi, this is a text-to-speech model, and I'm going to leave the settings as they were. And again, it's a warm model, so it's running straight off. And just a reminder, you've got the information at the bottom that this costs less than a cent. Obviously, that depends on the length of the input text that you're asking it to generate. Let's see how that worked out.
Hi, this is a text-to-speech model.
Okay, I don't think that was too bad, considering how quick it was able to generate that. So now we're going to look at the other side of things, which is once you've had the opportunity to play with some of these different modalities, you found one that you think is interesting, how do we then actually start to use it? So this is where we're going to get into the slightly technical part. And again, you don't have to completely follow along with me as I go through this section, but it would benefit you to actually sort of understand some of the terminology, etc. So if I click onto this part here, which is HTTP, this will give me some information about what I need to do if I actually want to run this. So you can see here, we've got all of the information. So there's my prompt that I put in. Hi, this is a text-to-speech model. Got information about the model that we want to run. That's its kind of unique number here, and everything else that we need to do that. So if I copy this, I'm going to come over here. So this might be the slightly scary part. So this is a way of actually running this. So this is rather than me having to go on, click around, type in the text. If I've got my AI app here, then my AI app would use an API similar to this to actually do the work. Now, if I copy and paste this in, it isn't going to work, but I just want to show you that it is going to fail. Okay, we can see here it says unauthenticated. You did not pass an authentication token. And that's because when you actually call these APIs, you have to provide what's called an API key. And that API key is basically a way of replicate, or whichever service, if you're using Hugging Face or whichever service you're using, this enables them to link back your usage of that service to your account. So basically, so they can bill you, essentially. It's basically to stop people just using their service without getting billed for it. So the way that you get an API key is you click on your organization here and you press API tokens. Let me move this out of the way. API tokens in this menu. And then I can create an API token, which I'm going to call session 3. And it's created this, which I'm going to copy to the clipboard. If I go back into here, if I paste this in so you can see what that looks like. So you can just see this is just a really, really long string of text that's meaningless. But this is a way of allowing Replicate to tie this back to my account so that they can bill me for it. So this you have to keep a secret. Because if you enable anyone to see this or anyone can see it, then they can basically run these models pretending to be you. They can get the results from it and you'll end up paying for it. So make sure that you keep these API tokens secret. And as we get into more of the technical details, we'll basically discuss how you store them, how you keep them safe, how you make sure that they're not exposed, etc. So I'm going to take this, and where it says here, replicate API token, I'm going to paste this in here. So now this command now has that information. So just so that we can see this is a different one, I'm going to say, this is a test of calling replicate using the API. So now, if I just clear this out, and I paste this into my command line, it's actually going to go off and run that for me. And we can see now, again, this is obviously something that your API app would then go off and process. For me as a person, I can kind of show you how you would kind of extract stuff out of that. But typically, you're not actually going to be dealing with any of this. This is computer-to-computer communication. So your AI app will go off. It will basically send this command. It will get this response. It will then know what to do next. So what has Replicate actually given us back? Well, they've given me like a job number. They've told me which model I'm calling. They've given me the serial number of the model, which matches the serial number I requested up here. It's given me the input, which is, there we go. This is a test of calling Replicate using the API. Some of the other settings, which we didn't change. And it's told me that it started the job. So it's not actually going to give me the response, but what it is doing here is it's given me this get link here, which will enable me to follow up with Replicate and actually get the response once it's done. So I'm going to keep this just here, just now, but this will not give me the information I need. So if I basically ask that, so if I show you that quickly, if I click on this link, it's going to say I did not pass the authentication token. And again, that's to stop other people using your model predictions and your usages. So let's just go back into here. And I'm going to say API reference. This will give me all the information that I need. This is something that your development team will do. So you can point them to this documentation. They will understand what that means. But for us, for now, this is just give us an example of how an API works. So we can see here that we've got this thing, which enables us to follow up what the model's doing for us. So let's just paste this here. And I'm going to put this just here. And again, this is just experience, knowing exactly how all of this ties together. But essentially, this is just for you to get a sense of what's going on behind the scenes when these API models talk to each other and when your AI app talks to these AI models. So I put all of that together. Let's see what happens when I run this. I did not pass a token. Yep, you're right, because there's no space there. So let's do that again. And here we go. So now I've got a load of stuff back, and you can kind of see these like bars. And that corresponds to, if you kind of remember when we ran it, we had this bar chart that went over and over, and that showed us the progress. So we can see that this is now done. And what else do we have here? So get. So we should have an output that tells us where this file is that we created. Let me see if this is it here. Let's try this once more. Audio out, this is what I'm looking for. So if I click on this, this is now the audio output.
Of calling replicate using the API.
So this is a test of using replicate using the API, which is exactly what we asked it to generate. So that's the output. So to tie this all together, your AI app would take in a prompt from the user. Your AI app would then call this command, which would pass off that prompt to the replicate model that you've chosen. So you do the experimentation, you find one that you think is suitable for what it is you want to do, whether that's image upscaling, whether it's voice creation, or any of the other hundreds of models that are available on Replicate, Hugging Face, and other platforms. That would then give you back the information that you need to follow up on that job. And then we followed up on the job and we got the output. And then your AI app would then play that audio for the user, and that would be what you could charge them for example. Okay, so just looking at the time, this is, again, as always, I keep on trying to keep this to 10 minutes. We're now in half an hour, so I think it probably makes sense to end it soon before we go into too much of the technical detail. But what we'll do next time is we'll actually take a look and see how we can turn this into a very, very simple prototype AI app that ties all of this together. So what would I like you to do? Alex has said that we should set some homework, so let's do that. So basically have an explore would be what I would say. So literally click on explore, have a look and see what models are available, have a look and see what sparks your interest, or if you already have an application or a use case in mind, try and find a model that fits your use case. Click into one of these models. I'm just going to pick one totally at random. This one probably isn't a good example. No, that's not a good example for various reasons. Okay, let's pick this one. This is something that tells you who is talking in a video. A very, very niche use case, but that might be something that's interesting. Have a play around with it. Try all of the different settings. Use the README files to see what these different settings do. Come up with a good set of inputs and settings that work for what it is you want to do. And then when you have the next call, you can basically feedback to us which models you found, which ones you think are interesting. If you are feeling very, very adventurous, you can try and use the APIs, have a play around with those, etc., just so that you can get a feel for the kind of technical side of things. But obviously that's completely optional. That's the kind of thing that your development team will do, and Alex will cover in the future how to set that kind of development up, etc. Okay, so that's your homework. And it should be a fun one, right? Is go off and actually play with these models, find out ones that look interesting, and there's loads on here. So I do apologize if you end up losing a lot of time playing with a lot of these models, but they are pretty cool. And if you find something that's interesting, then do let us know what it is you found and what you're intending to do with it. One other thing I will mention, this is just a bit of sort of cybersecurity advice. So obviously I've now recorded this video and my API token is in this video. And that means that if you were to sit there with a pen and paper, I doubt any of you will, but if someone was to sit there with a pen and paper or an OCR to actually read the text and turn it into something, you could then basically run as many models as you want and we would end up paying for it. So if you ever do accidentally expose your API key, again, it's very important to keep it secret, but if you do expose it, then if you go back into the API token settings, then you can then delete it. Okay, and that means that that token, basically you can delete it from here and then that no longer is available for use. Okay, great. So hopefully this has given you an idea of some of the other modalities and models and where you can find them and what you can do with them. And really looking forward to seeing which models you like, which use cases you find interesting. And as I mentioned, next time we'll actually look at seeing how we can prototype a very, very basic AI app off the back of it. Great, thanks very much for joining me, and I will catch you next time.